I'm always excited to go out into the real world when you're not writing a book and talk to a group of advisors like you. Ones that really care about their clients, who want to have meaningful conversations, who connect and affiliate and partner with an organization that is really putting client experience first. That's exciting, because I can tell you years ago that was not the case in terms of companies supporting this cause. But as all of you know in your positions, you work in a tricky business because your clients and you live in a world that is plagued by money taboo. And talking about money is considered not nice, or it's unnecessary. And so, as was already mentioned, half of Americans would rather talk about death, dying, or politics, not so sure about the politics anymore, but politics, than death. And so you are in a position where you are sitting with clients, you're tasked with having meaningful conversations with them at times in their lives where often emotions run high. And let's admit it, most of the training out there for advisors is on the technical side of finance. So today, what we're going to talk about is how can you break money silence? First of all, what is it? Why do we still have this taboo in a society where we pretty much talk about anything? And most importantly, what you can do about it in your office, with your clients, and in your life at home. So let's get started with a quote. I'm going to read a quote, and I want you to guess what century this came from. And do me a favor, I am big into having you yell out things. Later we'll have you have a mic, but just, be loud. This is your chance to speak up. So here is the quote. Money is the oil that greases the wheels of society, but oil is filthy, sticky stuff, and we should clean our hands of it before coming out into polite society. What century? 14th, 19th, 18th? If anybody got your event app and viewed it earlier, you might know the answer because it snuck in there. Basically, it is from a style guide in 2001. So for some of you, millennials, if there are millennials in the room, you might think 2001 was a long, long time ago. But for a lot of us, that wasn't that long ago. And so basically what this tells me is that still that taboo is so present in our lives. And all of you are working day in and day out to talk and have these conversations with people and help them kind of push through and plan for their financial future. But it's tricky if you're faced with this money silence, this idea that somehow I'm not even supposed to talk to my partner about money, so how am I going to talk to my advisor? Maybe I'll keep some of it pretty close to the heart. And so when we're talking about money silence today, I want you to remember that money silence is that uncomfortable feeling, that's mixed emotions that people have around talking about finances. And it is more than just the dollars and cents. It is about what I call the human side of finance. So the feelings, the thoughts, the values, the goals, the legacy you want to leave, talking about the fact that mom and dad are aging and what does that mean for our finances in our life. It's all of that stuff. And so breaking money silence, I believe, is something that each and every one of you is so uniquely positioned to be able to do, given the fact that you do what most people don't do, which is talk about money. And so why do I even bother about money silence? Why did this become my thing if I started out talking about women and wealth and couples and money? And how did I get really to this place? Because for the past decade or so, I've been running around talking to advisors. And when I use the term advisors, by the way, I use it generically. I know people can have different roles. But I'm talking to advisors, and I'm hearing, I really want to talk about money with my clients. I really want to have legacy conversations. I really want to help them plan for their kids' future or help them be more financially literate. But they don't want to talk about it. And then I run around and write books, and I talk to my girlfriends and my friends, and what they say when I'm doing interviews is, that financial advisor, that wealth manager, they don't want to hear about money. They don't want to have those conversations with me. And so there's a disconnect. And there's a price of that disconnect that I think is quite high. As we said, 44% of Americans would rather talk about death, dying, or politics. Recently as last year, so 2018, a study was done, 62% of women would rather talk about their own death than talk about personal finances. So when we're talking about gender differences in our field, that's very concerning. 60% of families fail to pass down wealth over generations. Now, you probably hear the stat a lot. 70% of families fail to pass down wealth, or shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves. But the fact of the matter is that the 60% out of that 70% has to do with family communication and trust. So that wealth is not getting passed down, and you all know that makes it more difficult for you to keep those assets on your book of business at times of family transition. And last is 54% of adult children would rather talk to their teens about sex than their parents about aging. That sometimes gets a giggle. I give you permission to giggle. So basically, what does that mean? We all know an age talk has to do with our health, but it also has to do with the wealth of our parents. And I have an idea as to why we are more comfortable talking about sex than money. First of all, if you have a kid, chances are you've had sex. So you know a little bit about what to do, and so you can pass on that knowledge. What I find is that a lot of your clients don't have a roadmap for engaging in these conversations, and so that's what you are here to provide. So before we get into tools and tactics and what you should be thinking about when you're sitting across from your clients when it comes to this topic, I want to talk about some key contributors. And chances are some of these you will be familiar with, and you'll say, oh yeah, I knew that. And some of them you may not have thought about yet. So what are the key contributors? We just talked about it. Society's taboo against talking about money. No matter what the research is that's out there, I viewed a lot of it, still this taboo is hanging on, even with millennials. Family money messages. Every single one of us grew up in some sort of family, right? And we receive messages about money, how we should talk about money, how we should spend, save money, if we should not talk about money, if we fight about money or not. And all of these messages add up to be what's called your money talk mindset. And so when you are sitting with clients, what's happening is you're sitting there with all your family money messages. If it's a couple, they're sitting there with their money messages. That's a lot of stuff that's going on that nobody's talking about. And so family money messages in themselves are not bad, right? There are good family money messages, and there's also ones that are a little bit harmful. So let me give you a quick example from my own life. Growing up, I was always taught that it was important to save, right? A lot of us, right, in this profession, we're taught it's important to save. Thrifty Yankee. Does anybody remember Filene's Basement? Oh, yeah. Yeah, so Filene's Basement, I grew up on irregular underwear. I don't know if you know what that means, but it's a tag because your underwear was cheap and it was marked irregular and sold at Filene's Basement in Boston. Anyway, I was a thrifty Yankee. And so I can't stand up here and give a presentation without telling you that something I bought was on sale. In fact, I've been wearing this for years, and you may say it's time, but it matches your corporate logo. I've been giving talks for years, and I always tell people about what I saved. And so these pants were on sale, this jacket was on sale, and I'm proud. I'm still really proud to tell you that. Now, that was a positive family money message. That really helped me. I've also received messages growing up from very well-intended parents. They didn't mean to send this message, but as a woman, you can do anything you want, but you can't be too financially successful, and if you are, you better not talk about it. So that's a little tricky when you become a keynote speaker and you're traveling around the world, staying at nice hotels, and you're thinking, wow, I made it, but I can't really tell anybody about it. And so you have to kind of push through that. And so those are the types of messages that aren't necessarily overt. There are ones that you kind of pick up on over time and you have to push through. So each and every one of you has family money messages about talking about money. And in a minute, we'll take you on a quick exercise to help you start to tap into those. So family money messages, individual money shame. And I use the word shame on purpose. It's a pretty strong word. But a lot of your clients feel shameful about their relationship with money. How many times have you heard somebody say, oh, you know, my father did it better, or you know, my husband's going to kill me, or, you know, it's really hard for me to tell you this. We feel so much shame around our money. And when we talk about shame, by the way, it's not I did something bad. Shame is I am bad. So we tend to, as a society and as individuals, from a psychological standpoint, just feel all messed up about this money thing. And that gets in the way of talking about money, because if I don't feel good about it, why the heck am I going to sit around and talk about it? And when you start engaging in these conversations, and I've traveled around and had a lot of these conversations with advisors and clients, and I'm sure you've had this experience in your office, what you find is that we're as sick as our secrets. So the minute people are given permission to talk about it, I think they really want to. So those are the 3 contributors that I bet you already know about. But have you ever thought about how this industry contributes to money silence? As a financial services industry, until recently, right, we didn't want to talk about the soft side of finance. Or it was like, okay, we'll talk about the soft side of finance, but we'll put it in a breakout room that you can't hardly find. Because it's that, it's nice to have, not necessary to have. And so we're in a male-dominated industry, as we know, as witnessed here, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But the fact of the matter is, when something's called soft, it's not a compliment. So the soft skills actually encourage people to say, oh, we don't talk about it. And so in general, and I'm not saying anybody in this room, but in general, the way the training is, the way we are rewarded for our production, the way we're paid, our incentives, what kind of we can brag about at the water cooler, all usually relates to the technical side of finance, and the human side is left out. So we end up historically with an industry that's feeling phobic. A lot of times when I present, people say to me, well, you're talking about counseling, you're talking about therapy. And the beauty of it is I get to go, no, I'm not. I'm a recovered therapist. 15 years I worked in the field of eating disorders and talked about all sorts of things. But I got to tell you, the counseling field does not talk about money. If you look at the counseling industry by and large, you look at the research, a very large percentage of very great, wonderful people are money avoidant and have money avoidant personality. So we have a client who says, I really need, I've inherited wealth. I feel really uncomfortable with this wealth. I'm supposed to be really happy about it. Or I've had a liquidity event, the same thing's happened, and I feel really uncomfortable. I can't really talk to my financial advisor because he or she seems kind of uncomfortable with it. I can't talk with my therapist about it because they just seem to change the subject to something else that's more uncomfortable to talk about. And so where does somebody go? My hope is that they would go to someone like you, and you would have the skills to break money silence. And so in order to really be able to have these meaningful conversations with clients, you need to take a look at your own relationship with money. Now, some of you have probably already done that work, but it's not required in certifications. It's not something I teach at Bentley University in the Certified Financial Advising program at the graduate level. I teach the psychology of financial planning. It's a great class, but it's a very unique class in that it doesn't exist in a lot of these programs. And so what can you do about it? Well, for the rest of our time together, we're going to talk about what you can do about it. And we're going to start with an exercise that helps each and every one of you tap into what I call your money talk mindset. Now, if you've read my book or you've seen me present before, you know I'm big into mindsets. And part of the reason is I think if we take some time to really get a sense of, what do I think and believe about this? What is this going to be like for me? And how might it be like that for my client, or how might it be different for my client? So what I'm going to ask you to do over the next couple of minutes is do this exercise with me. Hopefully you have a piece of paper. I know that's asking a lot in the digital age. It's best to jot it down. If you don't have a piece of paper, you can certainly type it into your pad or whatever. I'm just going to ask you to complete 5 sentences, not aloud, you're just going to do it privately. By the way, when you do this exercise, a couple of rules. One is there's no right or wrong money talk mindset, so you cannot get a bad grade. There is no right or wrong money mindset. Second thing, you do not have to share your money mindset with anybody in the room. So if you are a supervisor, a manager, someone in charge, take your professional management hat off. take your professional hat, all of you, take your professional hat off, and for just this is going to take maybe 4 minutes, answer this as a person. And then we'll have you put your professional hat back on. But you're not going to have to share these responses unless you want to break money silence with people around you. Okay? So it's very simple. 5 statements, just answer whatever comes into your mind, and I'm only going to give you 20 or 30 seconds so you can't overanalyze it, because these are automatic thoughts and beliefs. You ready? I know it's been a long morning. You ready? Yes. Super. Talking about money with my loved one is. Just whatever pops in your mind, jot it down. Talking about money with my loved one is. Talking to my parents about money is. And if your parents are deceased, you can answer that as what it used to be like. Or if you prefer, you can say, talking to my kids about money is. Or my nieces and nephews. The financial topic I find most difficult to discuss. The financial topic I find the most difficult to discuss. And then the financial topic I find the easiest to discuss. Am I going too fast? I'm not the most patient person in the world. Okay. The biggest fear I have when it comes to money talk is. Another more powerful question is, the biggest lie I tell myself about money talk is. Love that question. Okay. It was quick. Was quick on purpose. You can go back and you can do this in a little bit more detail later on. Certainly, because they were nice enough to give you all copies of the book, you can go back and do an extended version of this. But for our purposes today, I just want you to look over what you automatically thought, what automatically came to mind in terms of your money talk, and take a moment. Again, you're going to connect with your neighbor in a second, but just for a minute, to think about, how does my money talk mindset impact my financial communication? Now remember, I asked you to take off your professional hat and put on your personal hat, so you may want to spend a second thinking about, how does it impact me personally? Because there are a lot of times I do this, and we've all been in this situation. You know, your Harold is an expert, or you've been in the field a really long time, and so it's very easy to say, well, I spend all day talking about this. I'm an expert at talking about money. But later on, you might realize, you know, I'm really good about talking about money with everybody but my mom. Or, boy, I have a tricky conversation I need to have, this is true, with my niece that I haven't had yet. So try to allow yourself to be a little bit vulnerable when you're thinking about these questions. So how does your money mindset impact your financial communication personally? Now, think about it professionally. What are some of the roadblocks that your mindset might present? And what are the strengths? Because there's no right or wrong mindset. We all have strengths and we all have challenges. And trust me, it's the same thing with your money talk mindset. So what I would like you to do is, I would like you in a second to turn to your partner, or a group of you. If you're kind of in a situation where it's a couple of you, that's fine. And I'm going to give you literally 2 or 3 minutes, not a lot of time each, to be able to say, in bullet points, one strength that I have in talking about money is, one challenge in talking about money is. And I'm going to leave it up to you if you want to apply this to your personal life or if you want to apply this to your professional life. So the question is, how might your money talk mindset influence the types of conversations you have personally and professionally with your prospects as well as your clients? And let's do it in bullet points because we don't have a ton of time. Okay? So you guys and women ready? Okay, so turn to a partner. I'll give you about 6 minutes, and then we'll come back as a group and talk about it. So I'm going to ask for your attention up front. It's really always hard when I help people break money silence to then say, okay, now you got to be quiet for a minute. Seems wrong. Okay, so we have a couple of people that have the Oprah within them, so they're going to run around with microphones. Basically, what I would love from maybe 2 or 3 people is at a high level for you to share either what was your strength around money talk mindset, or what was this experience like for you? Like, is there something that happened that you go, oh, I'll do this differently with clients, or oh, this is different in my life? So high level, whatever you're comfortable sharing. Former therapist, but there's a reason I'm a recovered therapist, so keep it brief. Okay. Hi.
I think the mindset is that it's always better to save, and if you can cut your expenses. Till I had a meeting with a client that was buying or building a $3 or $4 million house, and I said, well, now have you thought about what the property taxes will be on that house? And he said, well, Tom, if I can't afford to pay the property taxes, maybe I have the wrong financial advisor.
Ooh.
So I realized that maybe, don't spend with my budget, but spend with the client's budget, and know that he did have the wherewithal to spend that. Whether in my mind I have the wherewithal, but I would choose not to spend it, that's a mindset I have to be prepared not to try to project on my clients.
Great example. Thank you for sharing it. Now, when it sounds like you've realized what it is, but when that happened, before you take that away, when that happened, what was your intent? Because usually our intent is very, very good. So what was your intent in wondering out loud about the expenses?
Well, again, we all know that everything's based on cash flow, and the more fixed expenses you have in perpetuity or for the rest of your life, such as, we can all build X million-dollar house for cash and have it paid for, but we're always going to be renting it from the county or the state in which we're paying taxes to.
Yeah.
So the benefit was keep your expenses, your fixed expenses, as low as possible. That's the mindset. Okay.
So your mind, and what you learned was that your client's mindset was very different. And in fact, the way he said that, it's a he, correct?
It is a he.
Okay. Boy, it would have been great if it was a she. The way he said that, it seems like it was like, watch out, watch out. And so that's a perfect example of when our clients, they'll correct us if we listen for when we've kind of hit up against that. Sometimes directly, sometimes it's very indirectly. How about others in terms of your money talk mindset, either a strength or something that happened during this exercise that you're like, I'll think about that differently. We have somebody over here.
Okay. Thanks. So I guess a challenge that I face is when meeting with a client who has their spouse has recently passed away and they come in to settle death claims, is just what to say. And I want to be consoling and be compassionate, but I don't know, am I saying something silly or wrong that's going to offend them? And do I get the box of Kleenexes out, or is that the wrong thing?
The infamous box of Kleenex. Yeah.
So it's just knowing better how to handle a situation like that.
Okay, and was that an example of one of your more difficult conversations?
Yes.
Okay, great. Have you ever heard Amy Florian or Kathleen Reel speak on the topic of widows?
No.
Highly recommend you check that out. Later you can come and I'll tell you about their books and stuff. Great information, and I will get to you back there in a second. I think that's such a tricky situation, and there's a lot of financial information around that particular situation. There's also, the human side, which is really, really important. And one of the things that I did once years ago, I was giving a keynote presentation. My book, How to Give Financial Advice to Women, had just come out, and at the very end, I could tell there was someone in the audience that was just dying to ask a question, and he was like, Kathleen, Kathleen. And I'm like, yes. And he goes, how do you get a widow to stop crying? Yes. And so I'm on stage, total side note, but when I was in parochial school, I was sent to the principal for having facial expressions, basically. I was told that I was making faces. So I'm on stage, and I'm trying not to make a face, and everybody kind of giggles. And I think to myself, for a minute, I take a step back, and I go, wow, that was a really brave question for him to ask. And so I said, I will give you an answer, but, what was your motivation behind it? He goes, I just want to help. And if she'd stop crying, I could help. And so basically what I said to him and to everybody in the audience, and I'll share with you, is I said, sometimes just sitting there listening to whatever they want to talk about is helping. It doesn't feel like it because we're in a profession where we're used to problem solving and solutions, but that's where money talk comes in, that it may not be the right thing to do this or that, or it may just be sitting there and taking your lead from the client. So thank you for sharing that. We'll do one more in the back of the room. Are you still... Did I make that up? Oh, I might have made that up. Oh, way in the back of the room, my friend from Mad River. I've got a friend from Stowe, Vermont, Mad River Glen, Vermont.
So Kathleen, like you, I grew up essentially with irregulars, hand-me-downs, secondhand stuff. We really didn't do anything as a family that cost money. And yet, when I came into the business, I saw that my dad had been very good at squirreling away money, so he and Mom had a very good retirement. But my mindset when I started in the business, talking to clients, I struggled with people who made money, who made more than $100,000. That was beyond my capacity. Mm-hmm. And so once I was able to identify, this is my mindset, it's not their mindset, I've opened up and I've been able to talk to people, and I now have no issues dealing with high net worth people and bringing forth some of the issues that they have. Case in point, before I came, I got a call from one of the kids, Mom died. Do you know if she wanted to be cremated or does she want a coffin and viewing? Is there money?
Yep. I'm sorry about your client loss, which is Amy Florian would tell you not to say you're sorry. Total
And I let him
side
cry.
note. So it's an example of difficult conversations that we have, but it's important. And I thank you again for all your honesty around, a lot of us have not grown up with wealth and have thoughts about clients who have wealth. We have to put that in check. They're humans. Or we grew up with wealth and we have thoughts about people who don't have wealth. So whatever the case may be, your job in terms of breaking money silence is to get into your client's shoes and to listen more than you're talking and to really hear what they have to say. And one of the really, really important steps is to look within and go, where am I strong and where am I challenged? And no matter how long you've been in this profession, no matter whether you've written books on it or sat with millions of clients, we all are human beings, and that happens. And so I think that this exercise can be a really useful exercise to bring back to your clients, to bring back to your couples, or if you're in charge of a team, have your team do it and start having a talk about talking about money. It's less threatening, it opens up the dialogue, and it really taps into that human side of finance. So again, thank you for jumping in and doing that quick exercise with me. For the rest of our time together, I'm going to talk about tactics because I know how advisors like to bring tactics that they can use in their office tomorrow or Monday when you get home. And so one is the money talk mindset. We're going to also talk about the wise mind. So if you look at this list, you can explore your client's money talk mindset. You can actually work with them, and there's an exercise in the book around the price of money silence. How much is the silence actually costing you? I'll do a little cost-benefit analysis in a minute on that to give you an example. We need to help our clients tap into our wise minds. Often clients are told that money should just be rational, and we all know that it's rational and emotional. So helping them draw on both of those sides of their brain can be important. To role model healthy financial conversations, chances are you're doing it. You're in a position to do it even more. And to gather the emotional and the financial data. For a lot of folks, they have trouble with the idea that, emotion should just go to the counselor. Counselors aren't talking about it. Emotions aren't why I signed up for the gig. Well, I understand that, but money is emotional business, and it can give us great data to help us not only help our clients, but build that trust and improve loyalty. And in fact, my firm recently did its own research for the first time on the breaking money silence techniques and found out that 83% of seasoned advisors said breaking money silence with clients actually improves the relationship. And 77% of the same group of advisors said it improves client loyalty. So there are real business reasons to do this as well. Okay, so the cost, benefit, analysis of breaking money silence. Anybody study psychology, either recently, right? Okay, so we have a few. We have a decent amount, awesome. Does anybody know about motivational interviewing? So motivational interviewing is basically a technique that's used in healthcare to help somebody change a behavior that they may not want to change. It's a way of interviewing that helps kind of let the client feel uncomfortable enough that they want to change. It started, if anybody's interested in reading about it, it started around smoking cessation, right? We all knew that you should stop smoking. But people would come in and say, well, my wife or my husband or my partner told me I should stop smoking, and they didn't stop smoking because they weren't motivated. So the research was based on how do we help people move through a process where they go from not wanting to change to wanting to change. And so at a very high level, that's what motivational interviewing is. So here is a technique I've taken from that field and applied it here. And so we all know about the pros cons list. I know as a kid, my dad used to sit down and we used to do the pros cons list. This is a version of it, but it's a version that's a little bit more extended. So when you are thinking about somebody changing an unhealthy behavior around money, and in this case, not talking about money, say it's somebody who says, I want to do my legacy plan, or maybe my legacy plan's all in place and you're encouraging them to talk to the next generation, so there's no surprises and there's open communication, and you tell them all the reasons why that makes sense and they still don't want to do it. So you say to them, okay, let's take a look at what are the costs and what are the benefits of maintaining the silence. And what are the costs and what are the benefits of breaking silence? And what this model does is it acknowledges not doing anything as doing something. And it helps clients start to feel uncomfortable inside in a good way, because that's how people change. So in the column that says change, breaking money silence, so that's having the legacy conversation, you would have, in that column, you would have breaking money silence, and then staying the same would be staying quiet. The rest of it would be blank when you're sitting down with a client. And then you would ask them, okay, so what are the benefits of breaking money silence? Even if you don't believe it right now, what have I told you? Well, I might feel empowered because I've, communicated in a way in which my parents hadn't. It might improve my relationship or my intimacy with my kids. It can be strained from time to time. But I got to tell you, I don't want to do it. Okay, what are the costs? Well, I'll be uncomfortable. There'll be conflict. And I have to invest time in learning how to do this. I'm busy. I don't want to invest a lot of time in developing these communication skills. Okay, great. So let's look at staying the same. And here's where the model's a little bit different than what we're used to doing, because we're always pushing people towards action. Giving them permission to do nothing is powerful. So if you stayed quiet, what's the benefit to you? Well, I get to avoid feeling uncomfortable, I can get out of these meetings with you where we're talking about this, and I can stay in my comfort zone. And so what's the cost of doing nothing, of just staying quiet? Well, I got to pass down this money silence that I inherited from my parents. I don't necessarily want to do that to my kids. And, this is kind of extreme, but you have told me the stats about failed wealth transfers. And so what ends up happening is this person, this client or clients, fills this out. And the hard part as an advisor is you have to be quiet. They will figure out what to put in the boxes, but you have to tolerate silence. One of the things I certainly got from being a therapist is learning to be able to sit with silence. So sitting with that silence, seeing what they come up with. Once this is all filled out, you say, hey, on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the most, how motivated are you to change? A 3. What were you before we did this exercise? 2. What do you think you'd have to be in terms of motivated in order to engage in this conversation? I can help facilitate it, but probably a 4. Okay. So what's going to take you from a 3 to a 4? Not saying you have to do it, just help me understand what would take you from a 3 to a 4. So you're having a conversation about talking about money, about changing a behavior. By the way, this can apply to lots of different types of financial behaviors. And you are giving them a chance to get insightful, for them to understand what's going on inside of them. And the key to making this work is you have to truly be neutral. You cannot be invested in them changing, and you cannot be invested, well, actually, it can work to your advantage to be a little bit more invested in them not changing, because people like to push back. Well, I'm going to change. So it's a technique that you can use. You can use it in groups, you can use it individually. It is probably very different than what you're used to doing, but it's something that I've seen help people just have a shorthand and understand where they're at. And the theory behind it is it creates ambivalence, and when we feel ambivalent, that's when we change. I mean, think about it. If you've ever stopped smoking or decided to exercise more or to change an unhealthy habit, it's probably because internally you felt uncomfortable, not because somebody was pointing a finger telling you to do it. You don't want to be that advisor that's pointing a finger. I know it's well-intended, but that doesn't help people change. So that is one tool that I encourage you to use. Another tool is called the wise mind technique. Very simple, and it's taken from Buddhist practice or principles of the wise mind. You may have heard this before in yoga, in studying religion, whatever the case may be. But the idea is that we all have a wise mind, that there's the rational mind and the emotional mind. And that, as we've talked about, historically in this industry, we have overvalued the rational mind. Now, there are some really good decisions that come out of the rational mind, but sometimes the decisions aren't as great as if we include some of our emotions in the equation. So the idea with the wise mind is that the healthiest decisions are the blend between the two. So the overlap between those two circles is where the wise mind is. And this is how simple this can be. I'll use the example of a woman who is a female breadwinner. You've been working with her for a while. She is divorced. She wants to ask for more money at work. She certainly is worth more money, but she's having trouble having this conversation. I've set that up beautifully, so I'm hoping that's the example on the slides. If not, we'll just zig and zag a little. Okay. So you say, what does your emotional mind say? She says, oh, this is uncomfortable. I don't want to do this. What else? I'll be seen as difficult, right? Women who ask for promotions, by the way, we're asking just as much almost as men now, but we're seen as difficult or aggressive, or I'll be seen as difficult. So that's what our emotional mind's saying. And then you say, okay, so, and there may be a laundry list. Okay, so what does your rational mind say? Why did you even think that you should be asking for this raise? Well, gender parity is important. I tell, the women that I mentor, I work on the Women's Advisory Committee, and I really believe in this. And I also know, intellectually I know, you never know till you ask. Okay. So if you blended the two together and you said, you paid respect to your emotional mind and to your rational mind, what does that wise mind say? Once again, sit with a little silence. Clients usually come up with something. This conversation is going to be uncomfortable, but breaking money silence is important to earning an equitable wage. And so somebody goes in going, I've really thought about this, and you've really respected both my emotions as well as my rational thought around this, and helped me come up with a solution. Now, of course, this is a breakout. This is nice and tidy and neat. Life may not be like that when you're working with a client, but giving them this tool of drawing the two circles with the overlap and just having them express what's going on for the human side of finance, the emotions, and what's going on rationally for them is going to give you data to be able to coach them, to refer them to somebody who can help them if it's not you, and be able to empower them to feel more financially confident. I use the example of a female breadwinner. This can apply to so many different situations. So a simple technique that can have a powerful result. Another tool that I encourage advisors to use, and this is really simple, I've made it available in the event app for you, take it, it's yours, is the Money Talk Guidelines. Have you ever noticed that you can be sitting in front of a couple or a parent-child or two siblings that seem like really adult, insane, and then you start talking about a money conversation and they become these little kids and they kind of get a little crazy? So basically, what people tend to need, especially when they're new to money conversations, but even when they're having them and they're going to be emotional, is some guidelines and some rules. Now, these are very basic rules, but if you go over these rules with your clients prior to engaging in maybe a difficult conversation, or even one that's not that difficult, somebody that's new. Hey, you know what? We're going to have a lot of conversations about finance, and one of the things I like to do up front with my clients is just give them some guidelines. These guidelines just really help us know what the rules are and help us kind of stay on track and have productive financial conversations. Because you ever met that person? Oh, we talk about money all the time. We just fight it out. Well, may or may not be productive. So the Money Talk Guidelines. Because you can download this from your app, I will let you do that, but I'll just highlight a few. Using I statements. We all know this, right? We've all learned about active listening. Active listening is listening in a way to understand the other person. Not to prove your point, but to hear what the other person has to say, to confirm that you've understood them, and to engage in a healthy conversation. That, as a definition, right? Easy. Not so easy to do 8 hours a day with clients. It becomes hard. So encouraging our clients and ourselves to use I statements when it comes to raising difficult conversations. Now, there is one caveat that just popped into my mind, so I'm going to share it with you. If you have a male brain, which a lot of you do, not all of you, you have to be careful about the I statements when you're talking to your clients. Women, on average, tend to use collaborative language. We are an us. And men typically use more individual language of I and me. It's absolutely okay. It's nobody's fault. But if you are working with a female or a couple, and there's a woman as a member of that couple, sometimes you can say, I really think blah, 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 and they can take offense. Now, you have no idea what you've done, except for you said I, and you haven't used collaborative language. So just notice, have an associate sit in with you and notice how often you say I. This is something that we're still working on in the Kingsbury house. My husband often says, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to watch this movie. And I smile and I go, are we? And he goes, oh, collaborative language. So anyway, total side note. But with Money Talk Guidelines, encourage your clients to use I's. Don't mind read. It is so easy to mind read when you've worked with somebody for a long time or when you're a couple or a family that's been together a long time. Any of us who have been married for a long time know that we know what our spouse is going to do next because they've done it 1,000 times before. Now, this is where I'll call myself out. I am not good at this. I'm a big mind reader, and I have to watch it all the time. So you cannot mind read. That helps people ask curious questions and not go too far into what they think the other person thinks, because that doesn't get us anywhere. And then, of course, agree to disagree. So I know guidelines, you're thinking, wow, this is so, see, I'm mind reading. I just told you what you were thinking. You may be thinking, wow, this is so simple. But there's something to having a handout when you're working with partners or you're working with couples or you're coaching an individual to engage in a money conversation with someone outside your office where they can look at the guidelines and go, oh, that's right, I'm off track. It's not as personal. It's called externalization. And in the world of psychology, it is invaluable in helping people move forward. So feel free to use those guidelines as you see fit. So we've talked about Money Talk Guidelines, Money Talk mindset, cost and benefit analysis, wise mind. I mentioned earlier that I've done some research on breaking money silence. I'm going to call myself out. This is where I have a finance background and a psychology background, so most people who are authors do research, then write a book. I thought I'd write my 5th book and then go, oh, maybe I'll do some research. So I did that research, and I would love for you to take a look at it. All you need to do is text that number, enter your email address, and you will get an executive summary. I know you see a lot of speakers that come on stage and ask you to do this kind of stuff, so you're savvy, you know you'll be put on a list. If you want the research, get the research, then get off the list. That's okay. If you want to stay on my list and continue to hear breaking money silence tips, that would be awesome as well. Again, that research found that there's real business reasons to join the revolution. It's a key differentiator. There are not a lot of advisors out there that are willing to have these meaningful conversations. They may talk about having them, but are they really having them? It can set you apart to let people know that you're going to go through and engage in this type of dialogue with them, even when it gets difficult. As Jamie said on stage, that takes courage. It is really easy to skip over this stuff, especially in your setting. It's a female-friendly practice. We all know about the economic power of women. Currently control 11 trillion in in investable assets, and will control 22 trillion by 2030. It goes on and on and on, but you want to be female-friendly if you want to build your business. Women are 51% of the population and need good advisors like you. And talking about money and engaging in these conversations are very female-friendly. It can really support caregivers, and we know more and more there's an aging population and these conversations are coming up. It can help you protect your book of business. Why? Because if you are engaged in these conversations with individuals, couples, then you meet the next generation, teach them how to talk about money, engage in a conversation with them. When that transfer comes, you have met that person. These types of conversations are sticky. They really foster loyalty and trust. And lastly, it increases referrals. It increases referrals, I'm happy to say. It was 194 survey participants. I believe it was 80%, it's close to 80% of the advisors who filled out my survey were 16 plus years in the field, so we're not talking newbies. And about 60% of them said engaging in these meaningful conversations actually increases referrals. Now, because it's also a female-friendly practice, women on average give 2 to 2.5 times more referrals than male clients. For a variety of reasons, it doesn't mean men are bad. It's just the way in which women kind of address the world and think about the world, and they want to help you if they like you. It's going to increase your referrals. So there's good business reasons to say, time's up. I'm going to break the silence. And so when I was sitting writing this book, oh, I have to do this. You know these slides. I'm responsible for me. It's just kind of scary. Worries my husband. Okay. So when I was sitting in my office and I was finishing up my book, and I thought, what's my call to action? Like, I feel really passionate about this. I really think we can make a difference. I'm one person who isn't on the road that much anymore because I like my family and I love Vermont. How can I have a ripple effect? And I said, let's have a breaking money silence revolution, right? Lofty goal. But breaking money silence revolutionaries, all of you are them and can be them, just are people who take the time to dare to have one conversation a year that's a little uncomfortable, that's focused on the human side of finance, that's going to make a difference, either in your life or your clients' lives. Now, this morning, I'm downstairs, because the East Coaster, I'm up at 4:30. I can't go back to bed, so I'm like, oh, I'll go search for coffee. I go search for coffee. I go to take a walk. I go to the front desk, and this gentleman, Benji, who was awesome, anybody who works for the Hyatt, love Benji. Benji started talking to me about, oh, what do you speak on? And he got really curious, and we had this conversation. And so we were talking, and I told him, and he goes, I coach some of the managers around here to save for their 401ks. And I said, Benji, you're a breaking money silence revolutionary. So they're everywhere. So I'll end, and if there's any time and you want to have questions, or we can end and you can go to lunch. But let me just say that if you can imagine a world without money silence. Imagine that your clients come in willing to talk about money, actually anticipating and looking forward to engaging in these conversations with you, with their partners, with their families. That families are raising financially fit kids, and that the financial literacy crisis in this country and around the world no longer exists. That women and men aren't getting divorced as much because they're talking about money. Families are successfully passing down wealth, and I get to retire because the breaking money silence revolution has been completed. I think that would be a wonderful world to live in. So I hope you will agree, and I appreciate you considering becoming part of the revolution too. Thank you.